One of the great questions about what heaven is like that people really like to conjecture about is this. When we're in heaven, are we going to be able to see the things that are taking place on the earth, the good things, the bad things? Are we going to be able to see that? Are we going to be able to react to that? Are we going to have emotional or physical reactions to what we see taking place on earth? Well, frankly, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question. There are a couple of hints in Scripture. One is the story in the Gospel of Luke that is told about the rich man and Lazarus, that the rich man dies and then the poor man dies, and the rich man was evil and the beggar Lazarus was a godly man, and they're able to see each other across a great chasm. They're able to see in heaven what is going on in earth, because we have this picture of this rich man suffering the inflictions of hell. Because the Bible tells us in hell he lifted up his eyes and he saw Lazarus sitting in the presence of Abraham. And he's begging Abraham to send Lazarus to his brothers to warn them of the place that he now found himself. So in that sense, we have somewhat of a graphic picture of a chasm that separates what is going on in hell with what is going on in heaven. Now that's a spiritual world, but that's just a hint of what we might be able to see when it comes to the interaction of heaven with earth. That story of the rich man and Lazarus is the story of an interaction between heaven and hell. Well, I don't think anybody really knows what the people in heaven actually do see or do experience, but there is a verse, one verse in Psalm 90 that has always given me pause. And in Psalm 90, verse 4, it says, "For 1,000 years in God's sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night." Meaning that 1,000 years from the eternal perspective is like the blinking of an eye. Now, I don't know if that verse is speaking literally or figuratively, but either way, it's revealing to us something. That time as we know it, the beginning of the world, the end of the world, that whole thing in the middle called time, is but a speck of dust from the perspective of eternity, which means that from an eternal perspective, what they're able to see going on earth takes place quickly in the blinking of an eye. I have a son who is in heaven. I have a son who died when he was 16 years old. And there are many times in the quietness of my moments when I am feeling sorry for myself or wondering what in the world he might be doing at this particular moment, whether he's able to see the pain and the heartache of his parents, and whether or not that affects him. But if this verse is meant to be a literal verse, and there's every indication that it is, but I don't know for sure, then everything that we are experiencing here on earth is but a speck of dust in the whole realm of eternity. So I do believe there is a sense in which that world can interact with our world. We know that spiritually speaking, there's interaction all the time. The spiritual world is all around us. I always like to tell people that, if we could just take a knife and swing into the air and cut what we now know to be space and time and matter, we would cut open an invisible world that would probably frighten us. To see in that invisible world all of the angelic and demonic forces that are interacting with each other all around us would be very frightening. So there is a spiritual world, but can they see in heaven what is going on here on earth? I believe in a sense they can, but I don't believe it causes them any pain or sorrow, because the promise of Scripture is that when we are there, when we are in the presence of God, there is no more pain. There is no more sorrow. There are no more tears. There is no more heartache. There is no more death. And so from that perspective, I do believe that the interaction, if there is one, is brief, but it is not painful. Now, we can't prove that. We can conjecture that because the scripture also tells us that eye is not seen and ear is not heard, nor has that entered into the thoughts of men the things that God has prepared for those who love him. That we embrace by faith. Hope this helps.